The Ramayana, translated into English prose from the original Sanskrit of Valmiki, edited and published by Manmatha Nath Dutt, 1891. Ramayana, Ayodhya Kanda, Section 65. When the night had gone away, on the morning of the next day, eulogists, accomplished bards, genealogists skilled in reciting, and singers versed in musical permutation, presenting themselves at the place of the sovereign, began to perform separately. And as they eulogized the monarch with benedictions loudly uttered, the palace resounded with the sounds of the eulogies. And as the bards hymned the monarch, palm players celebrating the deeds of the kings of the Raghu race, began to play with their palms. And awakened by those sounds, birds on boughs and in cages worthy of the royal race, uttered notes. And the sacred words uttered by these, the notes of Vinas, and the valedictory songs of singers filled that mansion. And as on former occasion, men practicing purity and well up in serving, with numerous women and eunuchs entered appearance. Persons acquainted with the ceremonials connected with bath, according to the ordinance and in due time, in golden vessels brought water impregnated with hair sandal powder. Pure females together with many virgins brought kin, which were to be touched, Ganges water for sipping, mirrors, cloths, ornaments and other articles. All the things that were procured for presentation unto the monarch were worshipped in accordance with prescription, were furnished with auspicious marks, and were of excellent virtues and possessed of auspiciousness. As long as the sun did not rise, all these people remained expecting the presence of the king, but then they were alarmed as to what had occurred. Those ladies, that were beside the bed of the Lord of Kosla, were consoling their husband, and engaged in tending the monarch with mild and pliant words. Those females knowing the condition of sleep, feeling him as he lay in his bed, did not perceive any action in the ever-moving pulse. Thereupon, apprehensive for the king's life, they began to tremble like a blade of grass on a torrent. Filled with doubts at sight of the king, the ladies at last concluded that what had been apprehended by the monarch had certainly taken place. Overcome by grief for their sons, Sumitra and Kausalya were sleeping as if they were dead, and had not yet awaked. Deprived of luster, pallid, stricken by sorrow, and lying with her limbs contracted, Kausalya looked like a star enveloped in darkness. And after Kausalya, the king, and after him, Sumitra, and with her countenance faded from grief, this noble lady did not look particularly lovely. Finding these two ladies asleep and the king seeming as if sleeping, the inmates of the inner apartment showed themselves as if their lives had departed out of them. Thereupon, exceedingly distressed, those paragons of their sex, like she-elephants in the forest deprived of their leader of the herd, broke out into wailing. At the sounds of their lamentations, both Kausalya and Sumitra suddenly regaining consciousness, awoke from their sleep. And Kausalya and Sumitra looking at the king and feeling him, fell down to the earth, exclaiming, "Our Lord!" As the daughter of Kosla's lord rolled on the ground, she covered with dust did not appear in all her loveliness, like a star fallen from the sky to the earth below. And when the king had departed this life, the women saw Kausalya fallen on the earth like the slain mate of an elephant. Then all the wives of the monarch, headed by Kaikeyi, burning with grief and weeping, were well nigh rendered senseless. And the loud sounds emitted by these, mingling with those who had been lamenting before them, attained greater proportions and filled the hall. And the mansion of the king became filled with people exceedingly excited and frightened, eager to know all about the matter, became filled with lamentations, with friends afflicted with distress, its joy instantaneously vanished, a scene of distress and dole. Knowing that the Lord of earth had departed, his wives surrounding that illustrious one, smitten with excess of sorrow and weeping bitterly and piteously, holding the king's hands, indulged in lamentations, like forlorn ones. Section 66. Seeing the king had ascended heaven, like unto a fire that has cooled, or an ocean deprived of its waters, or the sun shorn of his splendor, Kausalya, afflicted with woe, taking on her lap the head of the king, with tears in her eyes, said, O Kaikeyi, attain thou thy wishes, do thou enjoy this kingdom rid of thy throne. O cruel one, O thou of wicked ways, thou that forsaking the king had set thy heart on having thy son crowned, Rama had gone away, forsaking me, and now my Lord has ascended heaven. I can no longer bear to live, like one left alone in a wilderness by her companions. What other woman, except Kaikeyi, lost to righteousness, having lost her deity, her lord, wishes to carry on existence in another's kingdom. As a covetous person taking poison, through anger or some other passion, does not consider himself guilty, so Kaikeyi, having done this evil through Manthara's incitement, does not bring her guilt home to her mind. It is through the instrumentality of the humpbacked woman that this race of the Raghavas has been destroyed by Kaikeyi. Hearing that the king being made to do an unrighteous action, has banished Rama together with his wife, King Janaka will be filled with grief as I have been. That virtuous one does not know that today I have become helpless and been widowed. Rama of eyes resembling lotus petals has living been removed from my sight. The fair daughter of Videha's king, unworthy of hardship, in ascetic guise is leading a life of trouble and terror in the woods. Hearing at night the dreadful roars of birds and beasts crying, she exceedingly frightened takes shelter with Raghava. Old and having an only daughter, he revolving in his mind thoughts of Vaidehi, shall, smitten with grief, surely renounce his life. I ever faithful to my Lord will die this very day, embracing this body, I will enter fire. As embracing the dead body, that unfortunate lady was bewailing, the courtiers had the distressed queen removed from there. Then placing the corpse of the king in a capacious pan with oil, the courtiers performed the mourning rites of the monarch. But well versed in everything, the councillors, in the absence of his son, did not perform the funeral obsequies of the king, and therefore they placed his body stretched in the pan of oil. Alas! At length concluding it for certain that the king was dead, the ladies burst out into lamentations, and raising their arms, with tears trickling down their faces, they in dire affliction and extremely exercised with grief, lamented, O monarch, why do you forsake us, who have been already deprived of Rama ever speaking fair and firm in promise? Renounced by Rama, how shall we, rendered widows, stay with the wicked Kaikeyi, co-wife with us? That one of free soul is our master, as he is the lord of yourself. Rama has gone to the woods, forsaking regal dignity. Deprived of you as well as that hero, and overwhelmed with misfortune, how shall we live, reprimanded by Kaikeyi? She that has renounced the king, Rama, and Lakshmana along with Sita, whom can such a one not renounce? Thus with tears in their eyes, the wives of that descendant of Raghu, joyless and convulsed with a huge passion, displayed signs of sorrow. Like a night without stars, like a fair one forsaken by her husband, The city of Ayodhya without the magnanimous monarch did not appear delightful as it had done before, with the populace filled with tears, the ladies uttering exclamations of distress, and the terraces and courts deserted. On the Lord of men having ascended heaven from grief, and the wives of the king remaining on the earth, the sun, his journey done, set, and the night began her course. The idea of consuming the king's corpse in the absence of his son did not recommend itself to the assembled adherents of the departed. Thinking this, they in that way laid the king endowed with an inconceivably dignified presence, and with her terraces overflowing with tears that flooded the throats of the mourners. The city appeared like the welkin without its splendor in the absence of the sun, or the night with the stars enveloped. And on the demise of that illustrious personage, in the city men and women in multitudes, censuring Bharata's mother, became extremely distressed, and did not attain peace of mind. Section 67. At length, the weary night in Ayodhya rendered cheerless by lamentations, and populous with men with voice choked with tears, was spent. And when the night had departed and the sun had arisen, those officers of the royal household belonging to the twice-born order, Markandeya, Margolaye, Vamdeva, Kashyapa, Kaikeyi, Gautama, and the highly famous Javali, assembled together along with the councillors, spoke each on different topics. Then facing the royal priest, the eminent Vasistha, they said, that night that had appeared like unto 100 years has at last been painfully passed. The king, racked by sorrow for his son, having breathed his last, the mighty monarch has ascended heaven, Rama has taken refuge in the woods, the energetic Lakshmana has gone with Rama, and both Bharata and Satrughna, repressors of foes, are staying in Kaikeyi in pleasant Rajagriha, the abode of their maternal grandfather. Do you select someone this very day from the descendants of Ikshvaku, to be king here? Verily doth a kingdom go to ruin, when without a king. He that goes garlanded with lightning, and has a mighty voice, even the cloud doth not with skyey shower drench the earth in a kingdom without a king. In a kingless kingdom no one sows corn. In a kingless kingdom the son does not obey his sire, or the wife her husband. A kingless kingdom possesses no wealth, and wives are hard to keep in such a place. This great fear attends a kingless country. And where is other morality, besides that detailed, to be found at such a place? In a kingless country men do not form themselves into associations, nor do they, inspired with cheerfulness, make elegant gardens or sacred edifices. In a kingless country, the twice-born ones do not celebrate sacrifices. In a kingless country, in mighty sacrifices, wealthy Brahmanas do not confer on the officiating priests the dakshinas, which they receive according to the ordinance. In a kingless country, neither social gatherings, nor festivities characterized by the presence of merry theatrical managers and performers, increase. In a kingless country disputants cannot decide their point, nor are persons given to hearing Puranic recitations pleased by those delighting in the practice. In a kingless country, bevies of virgins decked in gold do not repair to gardens for purposes of sport. In a kingless country, the wealthy are not well protected, nor do shepherds and cultivators sleep with their doors open. In a kingless country pleasure-seeking people do not in company with females go to the woods by means of swift vehicles. In a kingless country long-tusked elephants 60 years old, bearing bells on their necks, do not walk the highway. In a kingless country one hears not the clappings of persons engaged in shooting arrows constantly. In a kingless country, traders coming from distant lands, loaded with various kinds of merchandise, do not with safety go along the roads. In a kingless country, the ascetic with his subdued senses, himself his sole protector, who makes his quarters wherever evening overtakes him, cannot walk contemplating the deity. In a kingless country, one cannot protect what one has, or procure what one has not. In a kingless country, the forces cannot bear the onslaught of the foe. In a kingless country, men cannot, at will, go on excellent and high-mettled horses and ornamented cars. In a kingless country, persons well-versed in learning cannot engage in controversy, repairing to woods and groves. In a kingless country, persons with intent hearts do not offer garlands, sweets, and dakshinas for worshipping the gods. In a kingless country, princes smeared with sandal and aguru do not look graceful like trees in spring. Even as a river without water, a wood without grass, a herd of kin without a keeper, is a kingdom without a king. The sign of a car is its pennon, of fire is smoke, and our banner the king has gone to heaven. In a kingless country, a person hardly preserves his life, and like fishes people eat up one another. Even those heretics, who having disregarded the dignity of social morality, had met with chastisement at the hands of the king, their fear removed, give themselves airs. As the sight is engaged in the welfare of the body, the king, that fountain of truth and religion, is engaged in compassing the good of the kingdom. The king is truth, the king is morality, the king is the racial dignity of those possessed of the same, the king is the father, the king is the mother, the king compasseth the welfare of men. By virtue of magnanimity of character, a king surpasses Yam and wise Ravana and Sakra and Varuna endowed with mighty strength. If there were not a king in this world to adjudge fair and foul, darkness would overspread the face of the earth and people could not distinguish anything whatever. As the ocean keepeth within its continent, we, even while the monarch lived, did not disregard your words. Do you, O best of Brahmanas, beholding our acts rendered nugatory, and this empire become a wilderness for want of a king, install that descendant of Ikshvaku or any other as king of this realm. Section 68. Hearing their words, Vasishtha said unto the Brahmanas and the adherents and counselors of the king, Bharata, on whom the king has conferred the kingdom, along with his brother Satrughna, is living happily in the house of his maternal uncle. Let envoys by means of fleet coursers speedily repair thither and bring those heroic brothers. What shall we decide? Let them go, said all unto Vasishtha. Hearing their words, Vasishtha spake unto them, saying, Come here, thou Siddhartha, and Vijaya, and Jayanta, and Akokanandana. Do ye hear? I will tell you what ye are to do. First, going speedily to the royal residence by means of swift horses, do you, renouncing grief, by my order speak these words of mine unto Bharata. The priest as well as the counselors have enquired after your welfare. Do you at once set out? A business is at hand that brooketh no delay on your part. But ye must on no account communicate unto him the exile of Rama, or the demise of the monarch, or the destruction that hath befallen the Raghu race through this occasion. Do ye, speedily taking silk apparel and excellent ornaments for King Bharata, set off. Thereupon, having been furnished with the necessaries for the journey, they bound for Kaikeyi went to their respective abodes, mounted on goodly horses. Then having supplied themselves with the necessaries of the journey, the envoys in consonance with Vasistha's injunction, speedily went away. Having proceeded by the west of Apratla, they in the middle crossed the Malini, and went towards the north of Pralamban. Then crossing the Ganga at Hastinapura, and arriving at Panchala, they proceeded westward through Kurujangala. And beholding watery expanses filled with blown blossoms, and rivers containing pellucid waters, the envoys proceeded apace on account of the errand they had on hand. And they darted past the Saradanda overflowing with delightful water, beautiful, and haunted by fowls of various kinds. Then on the western bank of the stream, coming upon a tree called Satyapalchana presided by a deity, and bowing down unto the tree and going round it, they entered the city of Kulinga. And having passed Teyobibhabna and arrived at Abhikala, they crossed the sacred stream Ikshumti belonging to the Ikshvakus for generations. Beholding here Brahmanas versed in the Vedas drinking water with their joined hands, they went through Vahalalika towards the Mount Sudaman. There seeing the footprint of Vishnu, they, desirous of doing the bidding of their master, proceeded a long way, viewing the Vipasa and the Silmali and rivers and tanks and pools and ponds and sheets of water and various kinds of lions and tigers and deer and elephants. And with their vehicles fatigued, the ambassadors, on account of the great distance of the way, speedily reached that best of cities, Girivraja. And for pleasing their master, for the preservation of the people, and enabling Bharata to assume the reins of government, those envoys, casting aside negligence, swiftly entered the city in the night. Section 69. The very same night that the envoys entered the city, Bharata saw an evil dream. And seeing that evil dream during the short hours, the son of that king of kings exceedingly burned in grief. And finding him aggrieved, his sweet-speeched associates, endeavoring to chase the heaviness, began to converse on a variety of subjects. Some played on instruments, some for the purpose of pacifying his mind, danced, the courtesans, others performed scenes variously fraught with the sentiment of mirth. But although his friends intending to allay his agitation set about enacting passages calculated to amuse family circles, that magnanimous descendant of Raghu did not indulge in laughter. Then a dear friend addressed Bharata, as he sat surrounded by his friends, surrounded by your friends, why do you not, my friend, join in the mirth? Thus asked by his friend, Bharata answered, listen why this depression has overtaken me. In a dream I beheld my father, pale, with his hair loosely flowing about, plunging from the summit of a mountain into a dirty pool filled with cow dung. And I saw him floating on a sink of cow dung, and yet with a momentary laugh drinking oil by means of his joined hands. Then feeding on rice mixed with sesame, he again and again hanging his head down, dives into oil with his limbs rubbed with oil. And in my dream I saw the ocean dried up, and the moon fallen on the earth, and the earth as if invaded by enfolding darkness, and the tusk of the elephant on which the monarch rides falling in fragments, and flaming fire suddenly extinguished, and the earth rent, and the trees withered, and all the mountains belching smoke. And I saw the king seated on a sable seat of iron, clad in a sable garb, and women black and yellow beating him, and bearing a garland of red flowers, with his body daubed with red sandal, he was fast proceeding to the south in a car yoked with asses. And women clad in red garments were laughing at him, and a grim-visaged Rakshasa was seen by me as dragging him. This was the dream that I saw this terrible night. Either I, or Rama, or the king, or Lakshmana is to breathe our last. The smoke of the funeral pyre of him will be shortly visible that goes in the car yoked with asses. It is for this reason that I am poor of spirit, and that I do not respond to your words. Further, my throat is parched, and my mind ill at ease. Ground of fear find I none, yet am I subject to fear. My voice is untuned, and my grace fled, and I begin to despise my life, nor know I the reason why. Bringing to mind this various looking dream which I had not thought of before, and remembering the king of incomprehensible presence, this fear goeth not from my heart. Section 70. Bharata was speaking thus when the envoys, with their vehicles fatigued, entered the splendid royal residence surrounded by a strong rampart. Presenting themselves before the king, they, well received by him as well as the prince, bowed down unto the feet of the monarch. Then they addressed Bharata, saying, "The priest and the counsellors have enquired after your welfare. Do you set out speedily? A business is on hand that brooketh no delay on your part. And, O you of expansive eyes, do you take these costly raiments and ornaments, and present them unto your maternal uncle and grandfather. 20 kotis are intended for the king and complete 10 for your maternal uncle, O son of the monarch." Taking all these, Bharata attached to his relatives, made the articles over unto them, and receiving the envoys with goodly gifts, spoke unto them, "Is my father, King Dasaratha, well? And is it well with Rama and the high-souled Lakshmana? And is the mother of the intelligent Rama, the revered Kausalya, conversant with virtue and ever practicing it, well? Is the virtuous Sumitra mother of Lakshmana and of the heroic Satrughna well? And that wrathful one ever intent on her interest and setting immense store by her wisdom, my mother Kaikeyi, is it also well with her?" Thus addressed by the magnanimous Bharata, the envoys spoke unto him these humble and brief words, "Those of whose welfare you are enquiring after, are, O foremost of men, all well. Shri seated on the lotus asks for you. Let your car be yoked." Thus addressed, Bharata said unto the envoys, "Let me tell the king that the envoys are urging speed on me." Having said this, that son of the king, Bharata, communicated unto his maternal grandfather what the envoys had told him. Asked by the envoys, "I shall, O monarch, go to my father. I shall come again whenever you will remember me." Thus accosted by Bharata, his maternal grandfather, the king, smelling Bharata's head, spoke these auspicious words unto that descendant of Raghu, "Go, my child, I permit thee. Kaikeyi is mother of a worthy son through thee. Do thou, O subduer of foes, communicate our welfare unto both thy father and thy mother. Do thou likewise communicate the same unto the priest and the other principal Brahmanas, as also, my child, unto those mighty bowmen, the brothers Rama and Lakshmana." Then honoring Bharata, King Kaikeyi conferred on Bharata wealth consisting of choice elephants maintained at the palace and woolen sheets and deerskins. And the king presented him with dogs brought up in the inner apartment, resembling tigers in strength and prowess, furnished with teeth representing weapons, and large of body. And honoring the son of Kaikeyi, Kaikeyi gave him 2,000 nishkas and 600 horses. And for following Bharata, Ashwapati without delay assigned a number of goodly, trustworthy, and qualified courtiers. And Bharata's maternal uncle conferred on Bharata wealth in the shape of graceful elephants sprung in the Iravat mountain and the country called Indrasira, as well as fleet and well-broken horses. But owing to the hurry of his departure, Bharata the son of Kaikeyi did not appear to be so very much gratified with the gifts. Owing to his having seen the dream and the post-haste speed of the envoys, A mighty anxiety was present in his heart. Then issuing from his abode, that one possessed of exceeding grace passed the goodly thoroughfare thronged with men, horses, and elephants. Having left it behind, Bharata saw before him the inner apartment of the king, and thereupon the handsome Bharata entered it without let. Then after speaking with his maternal grandfather and uncle, Yudhajit, Bharata ascending a cart, set out with Satrughna. Thereat servants by means of 100 cars, furnished with circular wheels, and yoked with camels, oxen, horses, and asses, followed Bharata. Protected by the forces and the courtiers of his material grandfather dear unto him like his own self, the magnanimous Bharata who had his foes removed, taking with him his brother, Satrughna, departed from the abode of the king, like a Siddha issuing from the regions of Indra. Section 71. Issuing from the palace, the blazing Bharata endowed with prowess went in an easterly direction, and seeing before him the river called Sudama, crossed it. Then the auspicious descendant of Ikshvaku crossed the broad Hiradini coursing westwards, as also the river Satadru. Then crossing a river at Iladna, and coming to Aprapavata, they crossed the Sila and the Akavati, and arrived at Agneya and Selyakashanam. And having purified himself and seen Silvaya, that one of truthful purposes passed the Mahakailas and entered the forest of Chaitraratha. Then coming upon the confluence of the Ganga and the Saraswati, Bharata entered the forest of Varundaline to the north of Virmansya. Next, crossing the rapid river Kulinga and the Hiradini surrounded by hills, as well as the Yamuna, he ordered the forces to halt. Then cooling the limbs of the fatigued horses with water and refreshing them, Bharata himself bathed there and drank of the water, and then resumed the march, furnished with the water. Then the gentle prince by means of an excellent car, like unto the wind god himself, entered the mighty forest inhabited by various races of men. Seeing that the mighty river Ganga was hard to cross at Anshudna, Bharata speedily went to the famous city of Pragwata. And having crossed the Ganga at Pragwata, he went over to the Kutikostika. Having with his forces crossed that river, he proceeded to Dharmavardhana. Then proceeding by the south of Torana, he came to Jambuprastha. Then, Dasaratha's son went to the beautiful village of Varutha. Having for a while stayed at that romantic wood, he proceeded eastwards, and presented himself at the villa of Ujjihayana, where abound trees called Priyaka. Coming to the Priyakas, Bharata speedily yoking the horses, set out without delay, issuing his orders to the forces. Then sojourning at Savatirtha and crossing the river there flowing northwards as well as others abounding in various kinds of mountainous horses, Bharata arrived at Hastiprishtaka. And at Lohitya that foremost of men crossed the Kapivti, at Ekasla, the Sthanumati, and at Vinya, the Gomti. And Bharata arriving at a forest of Sala trees in the city of Kalinga, speedily passed it with his forces wayworn. And having passed the forest swiftly overnight, he at Sunrise saw Ayodhya built by King Manu. Having spent 7 nights on the journey, that chief of men beheld Ayodhya before him and thus addressed the charioteer, O charioteer, from the distance Ayodhya seemeth like a mass of black earth, albeit she boasts of sacrificial priests crowned with every virtue, Brahmanas versed in the Vedas and opulent people, and albeit she is maintained by Rajarshis. Formerly one could hear a great and mighty tumult all round Ayodhya proceeding from men and women, but I do not hear this today. The gardens, wherefrom persons having sported in the evening used to rush out at daybreak, wear a different aspect now. Forsaken by the pleasure-seekers, the gardens appear to weep. And, O charioteer, the city appears to me like a wilderness. And I do not as formerly behold the flower of the city leaving or entering her on cars or elephants or horses. Gardens which, frequented by people inebriated with the honey of love, met together for purposes of sport, looked charmingly blooming, I find as utterly void of cheerfulness, with the trees as if lamenting with tremulous leaves. Still do I not hear the inarticulate, though sweet and delicious, voice of beasts and birds crying in chorus. Why, as before, doth not the blameless and bland wind blow mixed with the perfume of sandal and faint with dhupa? And why, again, have the sounds of vinas and mridangas developed by beating sticks, which continually flew in a never-ceasing vigorous course, ceased today? And I witness various evil, unsightly, and unpleasant omens, and hence my mind is depressed. O charioteer, complete good fortune with my friends is hardly to be realized. But although no apparent cause exists for my depression of spirits, yet my heart droopeth. Then Bharata, depressed and cast down and with his senses afflicted, speedily entered the city ruled by Ikshvaku. And Bharata, having his vehicles fatigued, entered by the Vajayanta gate, and went on, followed by the gatekeepers, who inquired after his welfare. Then courteously telling the warders to desist, he with an agitated heart spoke unto the tired charioteer of Ashwapati, O sinless one, why have I been brought in this haste without any adequate reason? My heart apprehendeth some evil, and my disposition gives way. O charioteer, I see around me all those signs which I had heard told as occurring on the occasion of the deaths of monarchs. I behold the houses of the citizens unswept and unsightly with the doors flung open, and destitute of grace, without sacrifices and other religious ceremonies, without the incense of dhupa, the citizens fasting, and the people appearing with faded countenances, displaying no flags, etc. The abodes of the deities are not decorated with garlands, and their courts are unclean, and remaining vacant, they look no longer beautiful as formerly. And the images are not worshipped, and the places of sacrifice are in a like condition. And garlands are not displayed in the shops where they are sold. And traders looking anxious, with their business stopped, do not look as before. And in temples and chaityas birds and beasts appear dispirited. And in the city I behold men and women pale and woebegone and emaciated and anxious, with tears filling their eyes. Having said this unto the charioteer, Bharata, beholding these inauspicious sights, entered the palace of the king with a depressed heart. Beholding the city resembling the city of Indra, with her crossings and houses and roads void of people, and the doors and hinges covered with dust, Bharata was filled with greater grief. And witnessing many unpleasant things which he had never seen during the life of the monarch, that high-souled one entered the mansion of his father, bending his head, depressed in spirits, and with his mind extremely aggrieved. Section 72. Not having seen his father in his father's quarters, Bharata went to his mother's apartment for seeing her. On seeing her son before her after his sojourn from home, Kaikeyi, delighted, rose up from her golden seat. On entering his own quarter, which he found deprived of grace, the virtuous Bharata took hold of his mother's auspicious feet. Then smelling the crown of his head and embracing him and taking that illustrious one on her lap, Kaikeyi addressed him, saying, How many days hence did you leave the residence of the revered one? Hast thou felt any fatigue on the way incident to the car proceeding swiftly? And is the revered one well, and thy maternal uncle, Yudhajit. And, my son, hast thou passed thy time pleasantly during thy sojourn? It behoves thee to tell me all this. Thus asked, that son of the king, Bharata, furnished with eyes resembling lotuses, told his mother that all was well. 7 nights hence I took leave of that revered one's residence. My mother's sire is well, as also my maternal uncle, Yudhajit. My vehicles had got tired in consequence of bearing the wealth and jewels which that subduer of foes, the king, had bestowed on me, and it is for this reason that I have come in advance of them. Urged by the royal emissaries, I have come here so swiftly. But it behoves my mother to tell me what I wish to ask. This sleeping bedstead of yours adorned with gold is empty. I do not see the race of Ikshvaku in their usual good spirits. The king generally remains in this apartment of my mother. But coming here with the desire of seeing him, I do not today find him at this place. I would take the feet of my father. Do you tell me who asked you? Is he in the apartment of my eldest mother, Kausalya? Blinded by the lust of dominion, and looking upon that as desirable unto Bharata, which was exceedingly disagreeable to him, Kaikeyi replied unto him, who did not know what had transpired, that high-souled and energetic one, ever engaged in sacrifice, the refuge of the good, thy father, the king, has come by the state which pertains to all creatures. Hearing these words, Bharata of pure ways sprung from a righteous race, smit with the vehemence of sorrow on account of his father, suddenly fell down to the earth, and exclaiming in the anguish of spirit and in the excess of grief, the words, "Ah me! I am undone," that mighty armed one endowed with prowess, fell down, tossing about his arms. Then, overwhelmed with sorrow and distressed at the death of his father, that highly energetic one, with his senses distracted, indulged in lamentations. This bed of my father used to look like the speckless welkin at night crowned with the moon, after the clouds have gone off. But today, deprived of that intelligent one, it ceases to shine, like the firmament without the moon or the sea devoid of its waters. Exclaiming with tears trickling down, that foremost of victorious ones, extremely afflicted at heart, wept, muffling his graceful countenance. Seeing that one resembling a celestial fallen to the earth, stricken with sorrow, like unto a bough of the sala that had been severed in the wood by an axe, his mother raising up her distressed son like a mad elephant or the sun or the moon, addressed him, "Arise, arise. Why dost thou lie down, O illustrious son of the king? Persons like thee having their senses under perfect control, and approved by men of culture, do not grieve. O thou endowed with understanding, like the halo of the sun in the solar disk, thy sense, entitled to dispensing gifts and celebrating sacrifices, ever follows morals, the Shruti, and asceticism." Having wept for a long while with his body rolling on the earth, Bharata, afflicted with manifold grief, answered his mother, saying, "The king will install Rama and celebrate a sacrifice." Concluding this for certain, I had joyfully gone from hence. But it has fallen out otherwise. That I do not behold my father ever engaged in the dear welfare of his subjects cleaves my heart, mother. Of what ailment hath the king breathed his last during my absence? Blessed are Rama and others who have personally performed my sire's last rites. Surely the renowned monarch doth not know that I have come. If he had done so, pressing down my head, my father would at once have smelt it. Where is now the soft hand of that energetic one, which used to rub my person when it was covered with dust? Do you now without delay convey the news of my arrival unto the vigorous Rama, who is at once my father, brother and friend, and whose beloved servant I am. The eldest brother of one that is noble and cognizant of morality, becomes his father. I shall take hold of his feet, he is now my refuge. And, O noble lady, what did that virtuous one cognizant of virtue, that preeminently pious one, firm in his vow, and having truth for prowess even my father, say? I wish to hear news concerning us relative to the last moments of the monarch. Thus asked, Kaikeyi related all as it had happened, saying, bewailing, our Rama, our Sita, our Lakshmana, that magnanimous one, the foremost of those that have attained to excellent state after death, has gone to the next world coming under the law of time. Thy father, like a mighty elephant fast bound with a cord, said unto me these words during his last moments, blessed are they that shall see Rama and the mighty armed Lakshmana return along with Sita. Hearing this, Bharata, apprehending a second misfortune, was deeply moved, and with a sad countenance, he again asked his mother, where hath gone that righteous-souled one, the enchancer of Kausalya's joy, along with Lakshmana and Sita? Thus questioned, his mother at the same time duly said in words, which although highly unwelcome, she took as agreeable to Bharata, O son, that son of the king wearing bark has repaired to the forest of Dandaka, along with Vaidehi and followed by Lakshmana. Hearing this, Bharata, apprehending some moral lapse on the part of his brother from the dignity of his race, asked in agitation, has Rama deprived any Brahmana of his wealth? Or has he wronged any innocent person, whether rich or poor? Has the fancy of the prince gone after the wife of another? For what reason hath brother Rama been banished, there at his volatile mother, influenced by her feminine nature, related faithfully unto him her own doings? Thus asked by the magnanimous Bharata, Kaikeyi, vainly pluming herself on her wisdom, joyfully said, Rama has deprived no Brahmana of his property, nor hath any innocent person rich or otherwise been wronged by him, nor doth he ever with his eyes look at the wife of another. O son, as soon as I heard of Rama's coming installation, I asked for the kingdom to be conferred on thee, and Rama to be banished. Thereupon, he, staying by his promise, did accordingly. Rama hath been banished along with Sumitra's son and Sita. Not seeing his beloved son, the illustrious ford of earth, stricken by grief on his account, has breathed his last. Do thou now, O thou cognizant of duty, take charge of the kingdom. I have done all this in thy interests. Do not give way to sorrow. O son, assume patience. This city is subject to thee, as well as this peaceful kingdom. Having with the help of the principal Brahmanas headed by Vasishtha, duly performed the funeral obsequies of the king, do thou, without suffering thy energy to depart, install thyself in the kingdom. Section 73. Hearing of his father's death and the exile of his brothers, Bharata, burning in grief, said these words, deprived of my father as well as my brother like unto a father, what shall I, bewailing them and undone by thee, do with the kingdom? Thou, like one throwing alkali on a sore, hast, by bringing about the death of the king and making Rama an ascetic, heaped grief on grief. Thou hast come like the fatal night for the destruction of this race. Not understanding it, my father embraced live coal. O thou that hast thy gaze fixed on sin, it is through thee that my sovereign has come by death, and that, O stainer of the line, this race has by thy infatuation been deprived of its happiness. Having got thee, my illustrious sire, intent upon truth, King Dasaratha, afflicted by extreme sorrow, has departed this life. Why hath the king, my father, ever loving virtue, been deprived of life? Why hath Rama been banished, and wherefore hath he gone to the woods? Afflicted with grief for their son, even if Kausalya and Sumitra live, it will be hard for them to do so in the presence of thee, my mother. Surely the noble and virtuous Rama, well knowing his duties towards his superiors, regards thee as highly as he doth his own mother. In the same way, my eldest mother, the far-sighted Kausalya, doing her duties by thee, bears herself like a sister. Why, O sinful one, having sent to the woods her magnanimous son, clad in bark, dost thou not grieve? Having exiled the famous and heroic Rama, seeing no sin, clad in bark, what benefit dost thou perceive as thine? I deemed that thou didst not know how very highly I regarded Raghava, and therefore it is that thou hast brought this mighty calamity. Not seeing those chiefs of men, Rama and Lakshmana, by virtue of whose energy can I venture to rule the kingdom? The monarch was ever protected by that powerful one possessed of mighty energy, as Meru is protected by its forest. Like a calf burdened with a load capable of being borne by a mighty ox, by what energy shall I bear this burden which was borne by an exceedingly strong person? And even if this strength be mine through yoga or vigor of intellect, I will not crown with success the hopes of thee, proud of thy son. Nor, had Rama not always regarded thee as his mother, would I hesitate to renounce thee, whose heart hath been set on sin. O thou that viewest unrighteousness, O thou that hast fallen off from the way of the good, how could such thoughts unworthy of our line arise in thy mind? In this race, the eldest brother of all is installed in the kingdom, the other brothers remain under him. O fell one, thou dost not, I think, know the morality of kings, or the consequence that attends its faithful observance. Of all the princes, the eldest is always installed as the king. Even this is the accepted principle of all sovereigns, especially the descendants of Ikshvaku. But today the pride of character of those whose virtue was their sole concern, and who shone in the character of their line, has been humbled through thy instrumentality. And how, O highly exalted lady, O thou that wast born in a royal race, could such reprehensible fatuity take possession of thy senses? But, O thou bent upon sin, I will by no means fulfill the wish of thee, by whom hath been brought in the first instance this calamity calculated to end my existence. Further, O sinful one, I will do this at present to displease thee, I will bring from the forest my brother dear unto his relatives. And having brought back Rama, I will in a perfectly contented spirit, become the slave of that one of flaming energy. The high-souled Bharata afflicted his mother with multitudes of words causing pain, and distressed with grief, emitted sounds like unto a lion in the cave of Manthara. Section 74. Having thus reproved his mother in great wrath, Bharata said again, Do thou bear thyself from this kingdom, O heartless and wicked Kaikeyi. Having been lost to righteousness, do not thou lament me dead. What qualities of thine were taxed by the king or the exceedingly virtuous Rama, that both of them simultaneously have come by death and exile respectively through thy agency? O Kaikeyi, thou hast been guilty of homicide in consequence of the destruction of this race. Do thou go to hell, never to the world attained by my father, since, renouncing Rama dear unto all, thou hast committed this sin by thy grim act and brought me into fear. Through thee hath my father met with his end, and Rama hath taken refuge in the woods, and it is through thee that I have come to ignominy among all creatures. O thou enemy of mine in the guise of a mother! O fell one! O thou that covetest the kingdom! Do thou not speak to me, O wicked wretch! O slayer of thy husband! It is because of thee, stainer of thy race, that Kausalya, Sumitra, and other mothers of mine have been overwhelmed with a mighty sorrow. Thou art never the daughter of the pious and intelligent Ashwapati, thou art a Rakshasi born in that race, thou that hast destroyed my father's race, inasmuch as the virtuous and heroic Rama ever observing truth hath been sent to the woods and my father hath ascended heaven through thy agency, inasmuch as thou that hast perpetrated this arch offense, hast laid this sin on me, who have been forsaken by my sire, renounced by my brothers, and come by universal disfavor. O thou of sinful ways, having separated the virtuous Kausalya from her son, what world, O thou that repairest to hell, shall be thy portion? Dost thou not, O tortuous one, know that that one sprung from Kausalya's self, my eldest brother Rama, who is like a father unto me, has ever been the refuge of his friends. A son born from all the limbs of his mother, comes out from her heart, and therefore it is that he is far dearer unto his mother, albeit her friends are dear to her. Once on a time, it is related by persons cognizant of morality, Surabhi regarded by the celestials, beheld two of her sons toiling on earth and seeming to be deprived of their senses. And, when the day had been half spent, seeing her sons fatigued on earth, she, stricken with grief for them, began to weep with tears flooding her eyes. And it came to pass that as the magnanimous sovereign of the celestials was passing below, her fine and fragrant tear drops fell on his person. Turning his eyes up, Sakra found Surabhi stationed in the sky, distressed and weeping in extreme anguish of spirit. Seeing that illustrious one burning in grief, the wielder of the thunderbolt, Indra the lord of the celestials, waxing anxious, with joined hands said, Is there any great danger in any quarter? Do thou, O thou that art intent on the welfare of all, say, whence is this grief of thine? Thus addressed by the intelligent king of the celestials, that one well skilled in speech, the sedate Surabhi answered, Auspiciousness, O Lord of celestials! No sin is yours. But I mourn my sons fallen into evil plight, having seen them lean, distressed, and burnt by the rays of the sun Valivradha afflicted by the wicked-minded ploughman. Seeing those that have been born of my body, cast down and in trouble, I grieve, there is none that is dear like unto a son. Seeing her the whole earth is filled with whose sons by thousands, weeping, Indra understood that none is an object of greater affection than a son. And that Lord, Indra, also considered Surabhi of a person breathing a sacred odor, whose tears had dropped on his body, as the foremost being on earth. Even that one yielding whatever is asked, auspicious, crowned with the choicest virtues, although having all natural functions, showing equal kindness unto all, and of unequalled character, who maintaineth all creatures, she who hath 1,000 sons, grieves for her sons. How can then Kaikeyi carry on existence without Rama? Just and having an only son, that lady has through thee been separated from her son, like a cow separated from her calf. For this, thou wilt always have to suffer misery alike in this world and the next. I shall for my part completely minister unto my brother and father, and shall, without doubt, increase my fame. Bringing hither the mighty armed lord of Kosala endowed with immense strength, I myself will repair to the forest inhabited by ascetics. O thou that hast delivered thyself over to iniquity, I, looked at by the citizens with their throats oppressed with the vapor of grief, cannot bear this burden of sin heaped on me by thee. Do thou enter fire, or dive into the Ndaka, or wound a cord round thy neck, other desirable way there is none for thee. On Rama having truth for prowess, obtaining the earth, I, my disgrace removed, shall be blessed. Grieving thus, Bharata, like an elephant in the forest afflicted with a tomara or ankusa, fell to the earth sighing like an enraged snake. With his eyes reddened, and his cloth falling off, and his ornaments cast away, that subduer of foes, the king's son fallen on the earth, resembled a banner of Sakra after the festival is over. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please like and subscribe to be notified of when new audiobooks are uploaded. Thank you for listening and learning. Shanti.